Welcome to Design Emergency, the platform and now podcast that Alice Rosthorn and I, and that's Paola Antonelli, founded in the spring of 2020 to highlight design's role in coping with change and designing a better life for all humans, for all societies, for all species, and for all ecosystems. Alice and I like to remind everyone that everything is designed, for good and for bad, by humans or by other participants in nature, and that design takes on forms that are not part of the traditional canon necessarily. So design is not only chairs and cars, no, it's also diagrams, ecosystems, video games, infrastructures, and even scent. And so today's episode is indeed dedicated to scent and smell as a form of design, and thus also as a tool for investigation of our world. Every day, each one of us breathes in and out circa 24,000 times, and with each breath, there are signals that travel straight to the brain and trigger powerful emotions, memories, and reckonings. And each smell is composed of molecules that act almost as building blocks. So in other words, scent is an act of design, whether natural or human-made. And Sissel Tolaas, our guest today, would like us to understand and cherish smell as a fundamental tool for communication. She believes, and these are her words, that there is a whole world to smell and a whole world to educate how to smell. And chemical communication was the first ever way of communication between bacteria, insects, plants, animals, and humans. And it still is. Hello, dear Sissel.
Hello, Paola.
Welcome to Design Emergency. Just a few more words about you. So you are a smell researcher and an artist. You are Norwegian, but you live and work in Berlin. And your job, I'm going to make it fun, but it's very deep. But it's about you gallivant around the world. You get involved in wondrous projects that involve smell. You capture the scent and the smell of places, people, animals, ideas. And in your decades-long career, you have demonstrated your belief in installations, conferences, collaborations, objects, and much, much more to reveal a new universe to most of us unaware viewers and smellers. So I would like to ask you, how did you get to this? Because you studied mathematics, chemistry, languages, and visual art. How did that all blend into scent? How did you come into your unique field of activity?
First of all, I think it's very important to make clear that I never use the term scent for what I do. I tend to want to use or insist on using the term smell. Smell, for me, is the most neutral word at least in English. And it implies, all kind of direction a smell might take. So, that's a very important kind of starting point for me talking about my passion and commitment to the topic of invisible information in the air we all are so much sharing. And maybe the only thing in the world we all share is the air we all breathe. From the very early on, I'm obsessed with life and the process of living. And in the beginning, I made a long journey to discover the simplest, the most complex and compelling, myself and my body and my senses. And all this is free of charge, and I just need to be challenged and used properly. So I went off with those facts in my backpack. After approximately 7 years, I then came out as a completely renewed human being. I used myself as a guinea pig to understand the purpose of most of the interfaces we are equipped with, the senses, but also finding out the sense of smell was not appropriately used for whatever purpose it's meant to be for. So I decided between 1990 and 97 to use that fact and to explore the world I thought I already knew, literally becoming a dog for 7 years.
Were you always a dog?
First of all, I was born as an accident, and the rest is a continuation of that fact. So I was alert from day one in my life. And it has not stopped ever since. So that made me already very, very aware about, that invisibility and the surrounded air that made me be alive was important to understand and to take use of. And this, started with me being a young girl, asking strange questions, literally scientific question as a child, naive question, like, why is the air invisible? Why is the water, in this case the waterfall, white? Why does the birds fly and me not? So and this is naive, intelligent questions asked by a little girl in the west coast of Norway, and those are the questions I'm still asking today. And I think what the sense of smell, understanding the sense of smell, have accomplished in my case is to make my child in me still being alive, and that is amazing. Understanding the world, joy and playfulness, and never kind of accepting a no for no. And there must be some other way of understanding, and not relying only on what I see, because what I see doesn't say enough.
And how do you define your practice? If you were to tell my grandmother in Milan what you do for a living, how would you express that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I call myself a professional in-betweener, and trying then to kind of let the other, or the person who asking me the question understand what that means. Is maybe the simplest way of doing is, I try to understand the air that you breathe, and the air that you breathe contains small particles that do something to you beyond what you see, and this may influence your understanding of that very moment. It influences your understanding of that moment in an emotional way, and your emotional intelligence are triggered by this invisible information. And also now, after COVID, this conversation will be very different, because the topic in COVID was exactly this: invisible particles closing down the world. So the rhetoric used in COVID is the rhetoric I've been using all through my career and my life. And my work is about real, I'm dealing with real stuff, and nothing is more honest than a smell, and there's a whole industry out there that want to cover up that fact. And I think it's so sad. And science is there to be applied to help us understand the invisible air we all breathe in a different and more holistic way, and taking use out of it.
Yeah, but it's not only science. Thank God it's also design and art, and you've been using them a lot. It's at the time that we met, which was at this point, I think about 15 years ago, you were using any technologies at your disposal. I think you were experimenting. You were using mostly headspace technology, which is the technology that is used in the perfume industry to capture the scent, the molecules of live entities. Think of gardenias, but instead you were applying it to render essences from kind of objectionable objects like sweat, rotten fish, dog feces, and also to explore the everyday, as you said, the real aliveness. Yes, aliveness.
Yeah.
And you were putting them into an archive that at that time was 7,000 cents, and now it's 20. So you have this amazing library. And what is the purpose of the library, and how did you work with it?
So first of all, when I started off using myself as a guinea pig to understand what it means to use the sensors, to use and coordinate the information provided by the sensors in an appropriate way, I was approached by the industry and started to look into the industry of smell and taste. What are they doing, and how are they doing what they're doing? And long story short, I understood that I can do something with existing knowledge that had never been done before. Among others, how they were using technology to imitate, to synthesize nature. And I thought maybe I can use the same type of technology to understand, synthesize reality outside of the greenhouse. So I started to use Headspace and other advanced technologies, like you would use your smartphone to snap a shot of the reality that you just experienced. I will do the same with my little device. I snap the invisible part of that reality, look into the data, break up the smell into individual molecules, and get a scan out of the world I've just been smelling. So a nanosecond of a smell is what I catch up, and I break up and look into individual molecules What are they doing? Where are they coming from? What makes them exist, etc. So all this information then gets placed in archives of various kinds. Call it climate, call it body, call it ecology, call it tolerance, whatever. It's all kind of direction, including language, phonetic, para-linguistics, etc. So all those archives over 25 years are literally archives in process. It's like a diary, it's never ending story. As long as I'm still interested in being alive and interested in the topic of life, those archives will still grow. So it's works that are in continuous process like life is. So when I do concrete exhibition, I just dig into the archive, take out data, replicate, apply to the site-specific topic of concern, and the journey continue. And the journey is called life.
The first thing that we did together was this conference called Headspace that was here in New York, in which I had paired architects and designers with like high-end perfumers. So I remember that, for instance, there's an architect, Majora Carter, that had captured the smell of the South Bronx, or architect Toshiko Mori had captured the scent of gravity. And you introduced to all of us in the audience your theory. But then the first thing that we worked together and that I actually showed your work, because the funny thing is there's also a showing element, was the exhibition called Talk to Me, which was in 2011, which was about the communication between people and things.
Yeah, in general, what my work is dealing with the micro of life, and that can be from the body to the city and beyond. So I have done 55 cities over the years for various reasons, various purposes, and for various clients. And the project you refer to is one of the first one, which was Berlin, and it was about diversity and tolerance, looking into very diverse neighborhoods at that time, 2002, 2004, and kind of confronting inhabitants of the city. Yeah, okay, you might be intolerant towards the way your neighborhoods look like, but in spite of that, you all are smelling and breathing the same air. So I literally investigated excavation, if I might use that word, into those neighborhoods, trying to find the DNA of all those, neighborhoods, their streets, their activities, people living there, and made a kind of smell profile of 4 diverse neighborhoods. The project is called N-News, like North, South, East, West Berlin. And and then display this in kind of harmony, decontextualized hardcore reality, placed the smell in a comfort zone of a museum, got people to activate their sense of smell to understand the invisible quality of those neighborhoods. And then I took the visitor out to the respective areas.
It was like a map of Berlin. It kind of rebuilt the map according to the different locations. Yeah,
and
as you said, smell is also a spatial device. It immediately locates you in a space. And I'm sure that we've all had that experience of like grasping a smell for a moment and boom, immediately being transported to our childhood, to a particular location. And so the next project that we collaborated on was a kind of experiment also. For me, it was a program called Design and Violence, in which I was trying to explore, together with Jamer Hunt, the contemporary manifestations of violence using design objects as a tool. And you were the opening, it was online, and you were the opening act. You sent me an ampoule from the other side of the world containing the scent of violence, and I sent that ampoule to the person that would write the essay, Anne-Marie Slaughter, and she almost fainted. It was such a strong scent. So can you tell, it was like really a shock. Can you tell us about the Scent of Violence project?
Yes, the smell of violence, if I might correct you with using the terms that I kind of
Please correct me. I have, no, you're completely right. And that's so important. Yeah. So smell of violence.
Absolutely, because scent is certainly some very kind of positive. It might be positive again. What's bad and good in the world. Who make those rules. Anyway, that's another story. Yes, the smell of violence, a collaboration with Nick Knight, and we were looking into the senses and how we can understand the various psychological state of mind through smell molecules. And it's a continuation of another project I have done over the years and still doing, sense the smell of fear. So it was staged fights between kids in East London that were recorded, their body sweat were recorded during them fighting, literally, and then replicated and reproduced. And as the only thing that remained from these fights, the staged fights, were their body sweat. And in that smell, we could actually smell they were afraid.
And in a recent exhibition that you did about your work, your exhibition happened first in Oslo at the Astrup Fearnley Museum, and then at the ICA Philadelphia. And in both cases, you treated the two buildings as living organisms. So I just want to mention also the curator Solveig Osterbo and then Zoe Ryan in Philadelphia, and Forma Fantasma, who also were interviewees in our podcast, helped you with the installation in Oslo.
Yeah, so the museum became a living and breathing organism, literally live. And if there's nothing going on in the building, air is still the agent, and air is full of information. The building has become the agent. They're responsive to the current time and topics of all the works and archive were then placed into this building using the air, hacking the air condition to at all be accessible. So it started off with me literally living at the museum in Oslo during COVID in quarantine. And the first thing I ask about is where is the air condition? How does this building breathe? Where does the air come in and how does it go out? And what is that air and how does it move, the cold and the warm, and how would that potentially influence where I place my molecules? So it was incredible to have the possibility to operate towards the building in this way.
So the pandemic was a watershed in the life of the world for many, many different reasons. But when it comes to smell, it was really a moment of reckoning, awareness, and also deprivation. We were separated. We would only smell the few people that were around us. And some of us could not smell at all because one of the surprising and terrible consequences of some COVID cases was to deprive people of the olfactory ability completely. How did the world come out of the pandemic when it comes to your research?
I think the world has come out understanding a rhetoric that I've been used for 25 years. That's one thing. But the whole sense of deprivation in its utter meaning is also now being understood and also maybe tendency also seen as a quality of experience, the fact that the invisible particle enable us to kind of close down the world simultaneously, and we all literally were in something together and we didn't even see what this was, and we had to rely on, suddenly you had to rely on the information that, was given, to us beyond the conventional. So aerosol and the air become the main topic of the COVID. And, we had this experience of not having access to each other and using the senses the way we're used to. And this made us also start to understand how important the senses are for well-being and for at all being part of the world. We need to kind of activate the senses in much more, holistic way continuously. And I think a lot of the experience is still in our body and the way we are now very vulnerable and also tendency are very alert is because of this experience. And I tend to think without emotional reaction, there is no action. And what smell accomplished so geniusly is to activate exactly that, activate our emotion and memory in the quickest time ever in the brain. And understanding complex and complicated issue in the context of joy and play, I think, is the only way forward.
What do you advocate for? What is an ideal world for you in which smell is incorporated in the way you imagine?
I mean, what is ideal is a big question. I don't know if there's an ideal world and for whom. That's another thing. But I think the fact that we start to use terms like interconnectivity, interspecies, that we are all somehow dependent of each other, I think is very positive. And what does that mean in its consequences? That means, for me, we have to start to move beyond relying or just believing the semantic and semiotic is the only way to communicate information in this world. What if we start to rely or to learn how to communicate beyond the word? And this is also adding this aspect of joy and playfulness to the situation. Like, if you cannot say it with a word, maybe you say it with a movement, or maybe you just made a sound, or maybe you just add a smell. And then suddenly you have a completely different understanding of the situation, and everybody suddenly can contribute, even if you're not a mathematician or biologist or multi-skilled in so many other directions. So I think this scaling down to scale up again is essential to move forward. And scaling down also refers to being a dog or daring to be different, daring to get out of your comfort zone and just leave the meeting if you cannot stand the conversation. I said, I'm sorry, I have,
or
I
if
can
you
smell
cannot stand the smell.
Yeah.
If you cannot stand the smell.
Yeah, or I always can stand the smell, but the smell maybe tell me, and I tell that the smell told me to leave, and then if you're sitting around, let's say, you're sitting around a dining table and you talk about the smell instead of talking about how people look like.
You've also studied linguistics, and terms are incredibly important for you. So you had a whole dictionary that you designed many years ago, and now when you talk about how your research is moving, it's smell and, right? It's smell and the world, smell identification, the use of smell to convey information. So you've really moved into a phase in which you're activating smell to some goals. So what are these goals, and how are you moving now?
Yeah, so my work in total are, maybe you can separate them in two kind of groups, three type of groups. One is, replication, reproduction of real smells, through chemical, simulation. And the other is coding, smell coding. I have an alphabet called abstract molecules that can be applied to various settings, become references, abstract smell references, the same way that natural gas once upon a time got the smell added onto it, and the communication or the content is something, the gas is leaking, so you better be careful. And then the third group is then functional, looking into molecules and what these molecules potentially can do to the brain and to the body beyond the psychology, like physical, purposes, using a molecule, let's say to help people fall asleep, quality of sleep, and anxiety, etc., etc. So these are studies and research I've been working on for 15 years, and now slowly start to get really result that I'm applying to various projects in reality. And all this together, there can maybe be condensed down to how do we talk about this? Language. What is the state of the situation with smell and language? And as we already constated, the process of smelling, the way it operates in the brain, it bypasses the rational part of the brain, immediately activates hippocampus, memory, and emotion. So language somehow is kind of not even, the language part of the brain is not even activated. But I have not given up on that. So I've been studying anthropology linguistics, been working with linguists all over the world in various languages and various smaller languages specifically, where, tradition and kind of culture influence people's way of talking. So I come across the fact that the less time you have to express something to a smell, the better it is for the outcome of what you say. So I've been collecting expressions to words, same type of smell for over 25 years, and making databases and compare the term, the voice and the activation of the voice at the moment of smelling same molecules and same complex smells. And it's incredible to see the similarities cross languages. But it's also very complicated to make sense out of it. So the latest state of my lexicon, or the Nasalo lexicon, which I call it, is I develop a software that only purpose of the software is to collect the para sound, the phonetic of the voice at the moment you say something. So let's say there is a situation with 3 abstract molecules. These 3 molecules are placed in Philadelphia, in Oslo, in Greenland, in South Africa, in China somewhere, in Korea, and beyond. And they all share the same database. So you smell, and the software collect the sound of your voice rather than word what you're saying. Like literally, it's called paralinguistic, the sound, the phonetic of the voice, and the motion of the voice, and then place it into a database and sort it out.
Let our audience know the kind of research projects you're involved in, because they need to understand that scent is a tool for investigation and for design. It's about smell the world, smell identification, smell coding, the use of smell to convey information, the use of smell in education to memorize information, the use of smell to train tolerance, for the use of sensory ecology and how to train emotional intelligence, and it never ends. I like the fact that you created this kind of the taxonomy or list of possible applications, uses, or understanding of smell. It's really powerful, and I hope that designers will learn from it, because they have not tapped enough this sphere of our existence yet. One of the most recent kind of like train of research that you've been involved in is about smell and heritage, applying to such diverse things as locations and personalities. Can you talk about this a little bit, please?
Yes. So I've been fortunate to be involved in a couple of projects dealing with smell as a potential artifacts to be preserved for the purpose of heritage. And this is, I think, a very huge step forward. And the context of concern here is Pompeii, among others. Another one is the Pearling Pat in Bahrain, a collaboration I do with the former Phantasma. Our third project is Alula in Saudi Arabia, and the fourth one is the Elephantine Island in Egypt on the Nile. And on all those projects, literally, I am in the field with, in some cases, geologists and archaeologists, and taking part in excavations with my tools and instruments. The moment of excavating the ground, I'm there to collect the air emitting from the soil, revealing, hopefully, information about the past that we didn't or wouldn't otherwise know. And then all that data is taken to the surface and reproduction of individual molecules, plus the complex smell that might communicate, some of those recording might communicate, and then place them in the same context of what else has been revealed in the various sites. And not only are we here looking into how can we understand the past from from an organic in perspective, but also how can this be used to contribute to a story that I don't know who told and who tells which story is here part of the topic.
Are you trying to recapture the smell of millennia ago, of centuries ago, or are you capturing this? Oh, okay, interesting.
Yes. So, and also to, in this case, if we find a smell, if we find molecules in the, let's say in Pompeii, in the soil that give information about something they didn't even know, they didn't know before, this is then, taken to the next step and potentially also becoming a kind of a smell heritage of a kind, preserved as that this is a unique smell that you only can find this very combination of this strata and this combination with other elements in that very piece of soil in this case. And so looking into how smell can become part of heritage.
So this must be a new discipline. It's smell archaeology.
Yes, exactly. And also what was interesting also with the last excavation I did in Pompeii was the archaeologists and geologists and other experts in the field, how they suddenly started to understand their own role in the process. They said, we are here primarily looking for things in the soil. We are looking for glass pieces. We are looking for, things, objects. And now we're finding ourselves also including the sense of smell and in that process. And that might, in the end, influence how we write the protocols. And I think that is so interesting. So that experience then also become part of my project. Not only I collect molecules emitting from the various sites and look into the data and replicate what I find and communicate it afterwards, but also the conversation with all the experts involved. How could we, use the whole body in this in applying our knowledge to the topics of concern. So that's part of the future, what we spoke about before, about what will, and I think this is also, again, because of the situation we all have been in concerning, the census and COVID, maybe this is one of the direction,
that we can take.
Yes, exactly.
Talking about heritage, and kind of like smell archaeology, you also conducted a really interesting project with and for Balenciaga, really evoking Cristobal Balenciaga himself.
Yes, so over 4 years I've been involved with Balenciaga, not for the purpose to make a commodity and product, but to understand what is, in this case, heritage in terms of a designer. Where does he come from? His, his life, his various physical, in his house, his studio, his headquarters in Paris, as well as in Basquilan. Does any information in those places, invisible information in those places, could be of interest in terms of adding on to understanding his legacy. So I've been investigating into the various sites over 4 years, and some of the outcome have then been placed in fashion shows, and especially in the first ever haute couture collections that Balenciaga did since 68, when Cristobal left Balenciaga. So these archives are now part of the template that Balenciaga is using to tell various stories. Not only they have template for light and colors and etc., but now smell molecules is also a permanent, ingredients in whatever they do. Even if there is a situation where there's no smell, that's also a smell. So it's it's quite interesting and quite wonderful to be able to apply my knowledge to such a ambitious company and label, a brand like Balenciaga.
Well, dear Sissel, it's been amazing to have you here, I have to say. And I want to conclude with something that you said that I think we should all carry with us.
Yeah.
You said that nothing stinks, only thinking makes it so. And I think we should all start sniffing and smelling each other in order to get to know each other better, like dogs. So thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to have you here today. And all of you who are listening, we hope you'll be back soon for another episode of Design Emergency.